It's a snowy Christmas Eve, and under the tree for Chiefs Kingdom is a solid win like they should have had for quite a long time against the Seattle Seahawks that, quite frankly, was outmanned. Who stepped up, who gave their all, and who made the biggest plays? We're going to cover it today live from the stadium with Matt Derrick from ChiefsDigest.com here on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Locked On Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for free on every platform. Thanks for making us your first listen. Check out another Locked On show for your next one. You can probably hear me over on the draft show, by the way. We're brought to you by BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online. You can get a great 10% off on your first month by using BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. Check them out. I don't think there's a whole lot of therapy needed for this team, Matt, because I felt like they had a business plan. They walked on the field and they got it done. It wasn't spectacular. It wasn't pretty. It felt pretty businesslike to me. What is your takeaway from this win over the Seahawks?
Yeah, I think businesslike is a good way to describe it. It wasn't particularly flashy. The offense was efficient in the first half, even though they had a couple of drives that didn't go anywhere. Defensively, this team was on point. They were locked on all day long. Really, the only thing you could probably quibble with it all is just a couple of penalties at the end of the first half. But other than that, this defense, I mean, what they did, we've been talking about it, and my theme for the week was this defense has to get better at getting off to the field. You have to get stops in the red zone, check mark. You have to get off the field on third down. They were one of 11 Seahawks on third down, and I think, was it one of 6 maybe they ended up with on fourth down? Check mark. Turnovers, Juan Thornhill, check mark. The defense did it all. I mean, they did everything that they need to do today. This was a complete team win on a really tough day for parts of the game, the passing game and the kicking game. It was a bad day to be doing either of those jobs, but they got done in good fashion. And I think you had a lot of guys stand out today.
I will say I thought it was a good game from the defense, not so much from a lot of the people on the offensive side. I think that the offensive line did well for the most part, although there were a couple of guys that just continued dropping balls on third downs, which kill drives. And it happened. I can remember at least 3 of them. One to MVS, one to Justin Watson, and one to Travis Kelce. And Kelce came back and ended up having a really big fourth quarter. And thank you for that, Travis. They needed to be able to move the ball, and they were able to do it. But you can't have guys dropping balls on third down or not being able to get their feet in on a play. I'm sorry, the one to MVS on the sideline, you got to be able to get your feet down for that.
Yeah, and I think probably the ones to Watson were the most disappointing to me, at least, because that's a guy that I feel like has been pretty consistent this season, and he had 3 catchable passes. One of them was a little more difficult than the others, but coaches will tell you get your hands on balls, you got to come down with them, and he had that 3 times and didn't come down with the catch. So it was tough. But again, I mean, this was a tough day to be throwing and catching the football. With the temperatures out there and with the wind, the ball was moving quite a bit. So I know it was difficult to judge and to guess, where the ball was going to be. You even saw punters having a problem with the ball blowing while it's dropping from their hand to their foot. So that tells you just how much that ball was moving. And on top of that, it's cold. So it was like catching a brick. So I probably should be counting these guys a little bit of slack. I guess I'm not, because I'm saying it was disappointing. But I mean, it was a tough day for all of that. And to a degree, I mean, actually, it was a surprise to me that the Chiefs threw the ball as much as they did. I thought they would run the ball a little bit more, especially when they were having some success with it. And once they got a lead.
Well, and they started throwing the ball early. Sorry, Ryan. I just want to say one thing really quick. You pointed out, Matt, very tough game in the kicking game. I want to give Chris Lamons some credit because he made a very heads-up play on a play that nobody will remember, because if he doesn't cover that ball, Seattle recovers the ball, and they're in business in Kansas City territory. That was a huge play on special teams by one of the Chiefs' best special teams players.
You need it when you can get it. And I want to go back to the run, because at one point, and it was halftime, that I went and looked this up. And Kenneth Walker, the 41st overall selection, was averaging 2 yards per carry, while Isaiah Pacheco, the 251st selection in this last draft, had 5.7. Now, gameplay and game call evened that out down the stretch, and they both ended with 4.1 yards a carry, but it was vastly different. And I think that was really what set the tone. That and what we see now is almost, I think, we'll talk about this later in the week about are we approaching overuse with Jerick McKinnon? Because the 1-2 punch of Pacheco and McKinnon is really starting to spool up and drive this offense forward, not just in the run game, but in the passing outlets as well, Matt. Is that sustainable, especially as the weather gets colder?
I mean, that to me, that's going to be the big question is that, can the Chiefs continue this? And I think you saw them try to do this today, but can the Chiefs continue this two-headed monster at running back without becoming predictable? It can't be a situation where you just simply know that when Isaiah Pacheco's in the game, they're running the football, and when Jerick McKinnon's in the game, they're throwing it. You just can't get that way, and they have at times. I mean, there have been times in the last few years, and this was even before Clyde, but he was the latest example of it. That when Clyde was on the field, 50% of the time the ball was going to him. So you just kind of knew which direction that was happening. You can't let it get that way, and I thought they did a pretty good job of trying to mix that up today. They had more success with it to the Pacheco side. Pacheco had a really nice, run after a catch. He's kind of picking up. He doesn't have the patience that McKinnon does in the screen game. McKinnon makes chicken salad of some things that, when even the screens don't go perfectly, which usually for the Chiefs, they do get blocked out that way. But even when they don't, McKinnon's, patient and slippery enough that he's able to make things of it. I thought Pacheco actually, he had a really nice job of being a little bit patient on that screen that he had, picking up a block and getting a lot of extra yards as a result of it. So they're having more success with that. McKinnon, on the ground was not great. There weren't a lot of holes for him today. Maybe just not a good matchup for his style. He had 5 runs for 7 yards. You want more of that if you're going to give it to McKinnon. But right now, I mean, Pacheco's your running guy. McKinnon's your passing guy. If you can get a little bit of production from both those guys the other direction, I think it'll help. But right now it's working. So I think it's a good question about if it's sustainable and you don't become predictable. And I think there's a chance that it is, because I think certainly both these guys have it. And if you're able to get them to be productive while limiting their work, and it doesn't become that one of these guys has to get the ball to get into a rhythm, then I think the Chiefs have something here.
And I'm glad you pointed out the Pacheco catch, because I think that's a great example of something he needs to be able to work on more. And the more he plays, the more he gets those type of screen passes, the better he's going to get with his vision. What you've seen throughout this season is him getting better and better vision throughout the season running the ball. And that only comes with the reps. And that's why he's getting where he is right now on the field. So more screen passes to him, more passes out of the backfield, whatever. I think he'll get better with the vision as he gets more reps in that regard.
I cannot argue with you at all. The question becomes where do they go from here? What does this lay the groundwork for? And who's stepping up on defense? We're going to talk about the defense and the future on the backside of this.
And I want to tell you about our friends over at Turo. Turo is the world's largest car sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the UK, Canada, and Australia. In the U.S., book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Test drive that new electric vehicle you've had your eye on to see how it fits your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. And if you are out there driving on this holiday weekend, we would really appreciate it if you would make sure you do not drive impaired. This is coming from our friends over at the NHTSA. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every state, even in states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell you when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell. Everyone can tell. So what makes you think the law enforcement don't know when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Because the bottom line is, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI, paid for by NHTSA.
What is not paid for NHTSA is the salary of one Chris Jones, who decided to show up again and be his normal self. I think it's not overblown, Matt. Again, with another performance with a couple of TFLs, the sack, he's hitting the quarterback. He's contributing in the tackle department as well, though that's not his thing as a defensive tackle. I think there's legitimate argument that this was another step forward in staking a claim for the defensive player of the year. Am I overblowing his performance today?
No, you're not. I mean, a couple of tackles for a loss, sack, 4 quarterback hits on top of that. And not only that, there were plenty of plays that don't show up in the stat box that he was making early on, especially. And yeah, things got changed up a little bit when, Seattle certainly started paying a lot more attention to him. They were doubling him a lot more in the second half, but he was still wreaking some havoc. And that was also allowing other guys to free up. Because now all of a sudden, George Karlaftis and Frank Clark are getting one-on-one matchups, and they were winning those. And we've talked about that when teams give enough attention to Chris Jones, it's going to be up to other guys to make plays. And today they were doing that. Frank Clark was just absolutely a beast as well today. I mean, he had a couple of tackles for a loss, a couple of big plays, and has been playing the run really well. That only happens when Chris Jones is playing good. So, and we saw Karlaftis, with another batted pass. He's been so good at that. And I go back to training camp because I think we even talked about that on one of the pods but the last summer during OTAs when it just seemed like that Karlaftis just always gets his hands, in the way. Even if he's not getting to the quarterback, he does a really good job of getting his hands in the passing lanes. It seems to be an innate skill, and I'm sure Joe Cullen is probably trying to bring that out of him too. But he's a long guy that's got that ability, and he's flashing it. I mean, it's a big ability to have for you. So to me, it was about not only just Chris Jones, but the other guys around him stepping up to make plays. That I thought was pretty important. But Chris Jones, this was another all-pro defensive player of the year kind of performance today.
Yeah, Chris Jones played fantastic. And I think this goes back to show that he was just not feeling well last week. I think that's what this game shows. He wasn't himself. He tried to play, which also to me actually makes me love him a little bit more just because he tried to get it out for his team. He tried to do what he could to help his team last week. He just wasn't able to get it done near as much as he could this week. And I'm glad that you bring up other guys on this team because Karlaftis played a very good game, batting the pass on a big third down early in the game. That's good for him. Is it 4 sacks in 5 weeks, or has he had a sack in the last 5 games? I know it's one of those 2. I know he has been getting sacks on a regular basis now. When he wasn't getting the sacks early, he's now starting to get home. That's a great sign. But I have to say, Frank Clark played probably one of his best games that I've seen him play in a very long time. He was always around the ball. And yes, I know Chris Jones is a part of that, but Frank Clark was really locked on in this game.
And to me, I mean, one of the things that Frank Clark will tell you, I mean, and I think today it showed, I think one of the reasons why he is the player that he is, the reasons he's had success in his career, certainly in postseason success, is that he does his homework. I mean, he takes notes, scrupulously about, from film study and from watching opponents and everything. And he's got a big, thick book on every offensive player in the league that he's gone up against an offensive line. And for him, it's about getting the keys to the snap and figuring out, what they're doing. And today was a great example. I mean, Frank Clark got off the snap more than a couple occasions, I think, before the offense was getting off the ball. I mean, he was moving at the exact same time the center was. And that's not just good reaction time. That's simply reading your keys and figuring those things out and being observant and knowing it. He does that and he shares it with guys. And I think that the Chiefs certainly, I think they talked the officials into at least 2 false starts today because Frank Clark called one and Mike Dana called another.
Yeah. And Austin Blythe, I'm glad you point that out. Frank Clark studying Austin Blythe. Potentially maybe he got a little bit of that when he was in Kansas City last year. So a little bit of extra study time.
It goes a long way.
It's just the kind of student that Frank Clark is of the game probably doesn't get enough credit.
Well, and I think he has an influence on the rest of the team as well because the linebacker level was playing very well today. Obviously, Nick Bolton led the team with 17 combined tackles. Willie Gay seemed to be everywhere for about 3/4 of this ball game. Willie's a guy that brings a lot of energy. Nick is kind of a quiet guy. I hesitate to use the Batman and Robin comparison, but they are a duo now, Matt. Like, is it enough that one of them is on the field? We've seen Darius Harris kind of rotate in for Willie. I feel like Willie staked his claim that I need to be on the field with Nick all the time period, we don't have to go to the one linebacker set as often as we have in years past. Do you agree with that from here through January?
I mean, this goes back to a little bit of, I think Steve Spagnuolo is still trying to figure out what he's got before they get to the postseason and what some of their best packages are and what some of their best looks are. We have been seeing a little bit more of just Nick Bolton onto the field, and sometimes Darius Harris coming in with a Brian Cook, for example. Jalen Watson, obviously, and Joshua Williams both getting onto the field too, and just figuring out, what is their best lineup? What's their best rotation? And I can't rule out that one of the things that they have learned about Willie Gay maybe over the last few weeks is that limiting his snaps and focusing his energy on fewer plays might make him more explosive, because I'm with you. I mean, since they have been managing his time a little bit differently and splitting time with Darius Harris and going to some dime packages a little bit more, I think we've seen a bit better Willie Gay. And as much of an energy guy that he is, I could certainly see that, hey, you know what, if Willie Gay only has so much energy to give and you want to get that out of 35 snaps instead of 50, and you're going to get better play and better focus on those 35 snaps, that's, I think, what they're trying to figure out. Now, they may decide Willie Gay out there 100% of the time next to Nick Bolton is their best lineup. But I think right now they're just trying to find out what is, because I've been seeing a lot of tinkering in the last few weeks. And this is something we'd normally see at the beginning of the season. But remember, I think that Spagnuolo was really limited in what he could do early on because of the injuries. They didn't have a lot of opportunity to do a lot of those rotations. So now you're seeing them. And hey, if that pays off, in a few more weeks, once the postseason hits, that they find out their best, rotations, their best lineups, their best looks, that's going to be a help. But they are doing, I think, more experimentation this time of year than you would normally see.
That's a really good point, because it comes down to impact, right?
I honestly also liked what I saw from Chanel on the field today. Mm-hmm. He did get washed down on a play that ended up getting busted outside of him. But I liked what I saw from him. He was attacking the ball. He went after the running back very well. The one thing that scared me is I don't remember if it was in the second quarter maybe. He got caught in coverage at one point, and I don't think Geno Smith saw that Chanel was in coverage, because if he would have seen it, I think he probably would have looked there first.
Maybe so. There's a lot, and the coverage aspect is something we have to talk about, because we got good play from a number of players in the secondary today, some of the young guys. We're going to talk about the upsides of that next, go through that, and give out our game balls on the backside of this. But first, a little message from our friends at BetOnline, the number one source for all of your sports betting needs, info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get it all the odds, all the best games, and all the trends from every professional and amateur league out there, pro football to college ball. A lot of bowl games coming up, whether it's the past World Cup or whatever's coming next. Even MMA, you can get into it. And if you love all that, you probably want to get the podcast too. They have some of those for your betting needs as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info is through BetOnline, where the game starts. The game starts and ends with being able to disrupt the offensive tendencies. We talked about the pass rush. Hand in hand in that is the coverage. And I want to shout out one guy first because of what a departure it was, and that is Steve Spagnuolo. He used his pieces, I think something that we've been calling for quite a long time, at least I have. L'Jarius Sneed took DK Metcalf today. That was his game plan. You get DK, you follow him wherever he goes, and you take the ball away, decline as much as you possibly can. Now, DK Metcalf is a good player. I don't think you're going to shut him out. What did he end up, Matt? 81 yards on the day. Did not score. I scrapped that as a win. Offense. Right. I put that up as a win, not only for L'Jarius Sneed, but for Steve Spagnuolo in identifying that matchup and going with it.
Yeah, and it was 81 quiet yards because, like you said, he didn't get into the end zone. I'm not sure there was any yards after catch. I mean, because L'Jarius was in his back pocket. And with your big guy like DK Metcalf, and you get as many targets as he did today, and they're going to go to you, you're going to get your catches. But the fact that he made nothing of them and wasn't able to break them, I mean, that's the big thing with him. He's normally a guy who's going to be able to run out of tackles. He's going to get yards after the catch. He's a big red zone guy. None of that today because L'Jarius Sneed was all over him. And not only that, but L'Jarius Sneed was making plays other places too. I mean, it wasn't like he was so glued to DK that he's like, I can't worry about anything else. I mean, he had a play in the second half on Hart. Was a bubble screen. He's on Metcalf. He sees the play, pulls off of Metcalf, and just goes after Hart and gets him. So he wasn't just, completely glued. I mean, he was playing his regular game. And yeah, Steve Spagnuolo went to L'Jarius on Monday and said, hey, would you be willing to do this? Are you ready for the challenge of following and traveling with DK? And L'Jarius was, of course, he was up for it. He was ready for it. And I mean, it definitely shows, to L'Jarius, he felt like it showed a lot of trust from the team, that they trust him to do that. They were able to ask him to do that. That was a big deal for him. And after the game, DK Metcalf, told L'Jarius, said, hey, I got a lot of respect for you after today and what you did. I think those are the kind of things that are going to help a player. And I would expect, once we saw this with Traveris Ward, once he got a taste of that and showed some success with it last year, Chiefs kept going to it. So I would not be surprised to see this happen again. And certainly with the, if you can limit the opportunities, because you got a lot of young guys in the secondary, and that teams are going to go after whatever they think is the weakest point. Right now, they think that's Joshua Williams. And I don't think Josh has been playing bad. I think he's been playing really sticky defense. He's got maybe some bad luck. The best thing to me about Josh Williams is that he's been playing physical. He's gotten some calls to go against him, but he's not backing off. Mm-hmm. He's not saying, hey, wait a minute, I need to give these guys a little bit more room. He's just going after his game, and he just knows he just needs to get better at it. He needs to get, he just needs to improve it. He doesn't need to get less aggressive. And that's a good thing, I think, with Joshua Williams. But I thought it was all across this entire secondary today. You looked at it. I think at one time I counted 31 tackles by the secondary, and I know they finished higher than that. I didn't see very many, if any, missed tackles from this group. They were very physical across the board. Wasn't a lot of yards after the catch. There was a lot of work in the run support. I thought this was one of the best days from the secondary that we've seen in a while.
The focus was definitely there in this game, and it showed all across the game. Jalen Watson had a stop out in the middle of nowhere by himself. He doesn't make that stop. It's a first down, easy. Great play by him. And I'm glad what you're saying about L'Jarius Sneed. I think you make a fantastic point. The one thing I will say, and I know people are going to say, well, yeah, he got beat deep. That ball was thrown perfectly. That was a perfect throw. That was a great play by DK Metcalf. Say what you want, Ryan, but there was still great defense by L'Jarius. He was in position. The safety was late getting help over the top. So, I mean, you look at that, but you look at how I love what you said about Joshua Williams, too. The kid is playing tough. He's playing hard, and he is not afraid to stick his nose in, especially in run support, and that's huge. When you start getting that type of run support from your corners, that pays dividends on the backside of the defense because it's going to slow down the running game.
Yeah. And I'll leave the L'Jarius. We'll come back tomorrow, folks, and I'll walk you through L'Jarius's and one particular drive that really was the turning of the tide there. I think we're going to end up next season, maybe beyond that, looking back at this as the point in L'Jarius's career that turned. We'll get to that, but he has to have help. He can't travel by himself, and that means that Josh Williams and Jalen Watson have to pick up the slack. Trent McDuffie has to do that as well. I thought Trent showed up today, making a couple of nice plays, coming up and run support. But what we haven't seen from this team is takeaways. Juan Thornhill had 2 of them today. Only one of them got canceled by a penalty. But this is the performance that we have to see. The question is, against a middling team, that's great. Can they take this up a couple notches, Matt? Can they have this kind of performance in the coming weeks against playoff teams? What do you think?
Yeah, that to me, I mean, this is the kind of performance you have to back up. You have to do this again. You have to repeat it because you got a bad Denver team coming in here next weekend. And you need to do the exact same thing. You need to get off the field on third down. You need to create some turnovers. You need to keep them out of the end zone, especially from what just happened in Denver a couple of weeks ago. You need to reverse that entire outcome. And if you can back it up and do exactly what they did against the Seahawks today, that is going to be a big step forward. It's going to tell me a lot about this team. We need to see that. We need to see some consistency and build on it. And I'll tell you from, talking to a couple of the guys in the secondary after the game, part of it is, they're getting, the young guys are getting the message from the veterans like Justin Reed that, this is the time of year you've got to step it up. This is not the time to let up off the gas. This is the time of year when you have to play more physical. You have to be tackling. You have to be tougher. I think the guys today, the weather was something that they really embraced. They knew that on a cold weather day like this, you got to play hard-nosed football. And they did that. And they also get that the game is only going to get faster and tougher from here on out the rest of the season. And that's something these young guys need to learn. And I think they are. And the fact that they showed it on Sunday or Saturday, Christmas Eve is a great sign. Now we just need to see them back it up 1 or 2 more times.
we've talked a lot about the defense. I want to flip over really quick and talk about the offense. We're going to talk about Mahomes here in a second, I think, but I do want to shout out to Tony. I liked his touchdown. I know it's kind of funny that it's a touchdown pass, but it was a touchdown pass because of the design of it. But it shows his skill set in what he is able to do. It did not look like there's any possible way that was going anywhere. He stopped on a dime, cut, and made a run right into the end zone. I don't think he was even touched on that play. Fantastic design by Andy Reid. He even bobbled the ball and was still able to get a touchdown out of it. Jerick McKinnon getting a touchdown where he has two guys in between him and the end zone 5 yards out. There's no way I thought he was scoring on that play. He willed himself into the end zone. That was a great individual effort by McKinnon, so thank you for that. And then Patrick Mahomes doing what he did on the sideline. I wasn't sure if he was in because it sure looked like his feet may have gone out. But then they showed the replay, and you watch him actually put his hand down, make sure it's in bounds, and lift himself up far enough to get to the pylon and score a touchdown. That is the MVP of the NFL right there, making a play like that. And in a game where they didn't really need that touchdown because they were up and they probably felt pretty comfortable. But that effort is infectious to the rest of your team.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's the kind of play you need on your sizzle reel if you want to get the MVP award. So
Yep.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, once that hand went down and he kind of just pushed himself in, I thought of those 3 touchdowns, I thought the one that was least likely was Mahomes. I mean, McKinnon, I'm like, okay, this guy's going to weave himself in, and then you looked at a couple of the blocks that Tony got from Joe Tooney and Trey Smith on that.
Again,
I thought the only way the Chiefs were going to get a touchdown on that Mahomes play was if he saw Juju Smith-Schuster in the back of the end zone wide open. He didn't. He just went ahead and kept it, but we've talked about it before. I mean, that was an over my dead body touchdown from Patrick Mahomes, and he's capable of that. And that was, I mean, that image is an MVP image.
And a moment where he didn't need it. I just want to say that's the thing that
it was a nice to have kind of moment.
But he did. Nice that's I can do this too, Jalen Hurts. That's what that was.
Okay, well, that's fair. I'm just saying in the game, like we've seen him make over my dead body type plays. This scenario in this game wasn't that type of scenario. That's all I'm trying to say. I agree with you in the MVP race, but this scenario wasn't the same normal Mahomes magic type thing where he's trying to will the team to victory. They already had victory in hand almost at that point. So great play by him. And I'm glad you bring up Juju. I thought Juju actually played a pretty good game. He had a couple of good catches, and he continues to be a cog that helps move this offense along.
Yeah, and I mean, for the offensively today with this team, I thought that probably 75% of the game plan was a little vanilla. I mean, they did a few things creative. Anytime you throw in the jet sweep, we're okay with that. But that's also one of their bread and butter plays. So I didn't necessarily see anything offensively today that was outside the box. I thought that they just did what they do. And like I said, if anything, I mean, I thought they could have probably run the ball a little bit more on a day like today. But that's one of the things about this when it comes to the passing stats today, and the line for Mahomes is not good. And we talked about the drops. This was a crummy day to try and throw and catch the ball. So I almost don't care because if anything, it's just you saw another guy on the other side of the ball trying to throw it and guys trying to catch it, and they were a lot worse than the Chiefs. I mean.
Yep.
Gino, and this is an offense that has put up points. I mean, they have been effective at times. They have their deficiencies, but the Seahawks have scored points. And they just looked like they were absolutely outclassed today by this Chiefs defense.
That's where it goes. Great performances doesn't get my game ball, but we're going to start with that. First, Merry Christmas to everybody in the chat. Appreciate you guys being here live. If you're watching on replay, make sure you sub to the channel. We're going to start because Matt is our resident guest in-house. He gets to go first with his game ball, and we'll scramble from there. What do you got, Matt?
Hey, a lot of guys deserve it. Nick Bolton, 17 tackles, absolutely should be in the conversation. But I have to go with where it starts, and it starts up front with your Defensive Player of the Year candidate and your All-Pro guy and your Pro Bowler, Chris Jones. Absolutely disruptive today. The Seahawks did not have any answers for him, especially in the first half. We talked about the quarterback hits, the sacks, the tackles for a loss. across the board was just a fantastic game. And then, frankly, once Seattle started paying more attention to him and double teaming him in the second half, it just made things easier for everybody else. And when Chris Jones is that destructive inside, it makes things everybody else easier on the back end. So, to me, a lot of the great performances you got out of the defense today started with Chris Jones up front.
It certainly did. It certainly did. And to be able to pigeonhole into that, you get that from Chris. You got to back it up on the outside. This was a game changer and maybe a season changer from what we're going to have to see coming forward. This took this player to a new level. And if he can sustain that, it's going to be hard to afford him in the future, but it's going to unlock this defense. He is a cheat code at this point. L'Jarius Sneed gets my game ball for being able to give Steve Spagnuolo everything he needs in versatility and the ability to attack in new ways, in new concepts, and again, being that guy that unlocks the rest of the secondary as well. So L'Jarius Sneed gets mine today.
You know, I look back at the stats for today's game, and you look at 16 completions on 28 attempts for Patrick Mahomes, and that's a pretty mundane game for Mahomes, 224 yards, 2 TDs. But if you start looking at the targets, Isaiah Pacheco got 2 targets, had 1 reception for 32 yards. Noah Gray had the first catch of the game on the first play of the game, was his only target for 8 yards. Kadarius Toney had 2 targets, 1 catch, and 1 TD. Sky Moore, 1 target for 5 yards. Valdez-Scantling, 2 targets, no receptions. Justin Watson, 4 targets, no receptions. Really hard to see help from Mahomes from this offense. And that's who I have to give my game ball to, is Patrick Mahomes. He willed this team to win in different ways and at different times. That touchdown is a great example of what he did with his feet to will this team to win, but also continuing to throw the ball where it needed to go, and not really, I don't think, having a turnover-worthy play. I don't think there was one ball that I was really concerned that he was going to throw a pick on, unless it bounced off somebody else's hands, and that's not on him. So that's where my game ball goes. I got to give it to Mahomes. As Ryan said, thank you so much for listening. Merry Christmas to everybody. Please enjoy this time with your family. We really do appreciate it.
Very, very much. Take care, Matt. Thanks for the time and for not putting the Santa hat on. I appreciate that too.
Hey, I do have my Scrooge McDuck tie on. So
rock and roll.
We've got that. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
You've got it covered.
Thank you for everything.
You guys have a great holiday. We'll be back with more this coming week. Take care, and we'll talk to you next time.